So, in the past I've done some tier lists of bands. I did a 70s one and I did a 90s one. Looking back, I definitely could have made a few better decisions. Those videos continue to this day to get a lot of hate. I don't entirely blame everyone for some of those criticisms. However, today I am ready for more ass pounding because I have a somewhat decent 2000s rock band tier list. Now this should be, I think for me, I should be a little more well versed in this. I grew up with a lot of these bands. I've listened to a decent amount of a lot of these, and I have listened to every single one of these at some point, to some extent. I'm gonna try to do this as unbiased as possible, but that really is all this is, really. It's a tier list, they're all biased. And for the record, I'm going to be rank any bands that came up in the 90s, which is a good portion of these. I'm only going to be counting their 2000s catalog, not the 2010s either, just based on what they released in the 2000s, which significantly drops a lot of these. All that being said, I guess we'll start. Starting with Paramore. Right away, a band that I really don't listen to at all that much, really. I'm very familiar with the song Misery Business. That song goes hard as hell. I've heard a couple other songs. I really only ever heard their hits. So I right away, this is a band that I'm not too experienced with. For what I have heard though, they fall into, like the harder pop punk category. A lot of bands sounded like this at the time. They had a girl singer though, which made them unique, I guess. But they're just fun pop, hard-hitting pop punk songs. And the singer, Hayley Williams, has a great voice. So we are going to put Paramore in, let's put them in B tier. Next up is Coldplay. Now Coldplay actually gets a lot of hate, and due to their more recent output, that's pretty understandable. However, I do think they had some genuinely good stuff in the 2000s, especially their earlier stuff. I think Parachutes is actually a decent record. Their following albums were pretty good too. Viva La Vida had some good songs on it. The one with the scientists had some good songs, and I don't remember the name of it, but that one was pretty good too. I love the song Sparks off of Parachutes. That one I keep coming back to every now and then. Coldplay is not bad. I think they get a bad rep. We're gonna put them in B tier as well. Panic at the Disco. To my knowledge, Panic at the Disco only released 2 albums in the 2000s, I believe. Those 2, I think, being their best albums. I went through a little bit of a Panic at the Disco phase in high school, but I didn't really get too into them. And today, I don't really listen to them that much at all, really. I thought Pretty Odd was their best album. Fever was good too, though. I liked some of the songs on there. But I think they're just kind of meh overall. C tier. Linkin Park. Now Linkin Park came at a time where nu metal was already pretty established. However, Linkin Park did have somewhat of a unique twist to the nu metal genre. They added a lot of electronic elements, which in their first 2 records I think work really well. And they did have some rocky moments in the 2000s. Probably due massively in part to their huge success. They are by far the most successful nu metal band, and I have to give them props for that, especially. I want to put them in B tier, but they're definitely better than these 2 bands. But I don't want to put them in A tier. Alright, we'll put them in A tier. The Red Hot Chili Peppers. Now, I think the Red Hot Chili Peppers while they had some hits in the 2000s, I think their prime was certainly in the 90s. Most of their hits came out of the 90s, and they didn't really deviate too far from that sound, so I think their sound kind of lies in the 90s, and it's not as much of a 2000s sound per se. And like I said, I'm basing this off of 2000s output alone, and because the Red Hot Chili Peppers definitely peaked in the 90s and most of their hits came out of the 90s and they only had a couple hits in the 2000s and they didn't deviate from their sound all that much, I'm going to put them in C tier as well. The Arctic Monkeys. I think the Arctic Monkeys had some good output I don't think they released a whole lot in the 2000s. This is another band that I haven't really listened to or delved into all that much, so I'm gonna be a little bit biased here because I don't really listen to them. However, what I have heard, you know, they have a somewhat unique sound, but it also just kind of falls into that garagey dance pop rock that was brought into prominence in the early 2000s. I think they're decent though. I'll put them in B tier. Back to Radiohead. Now I put in my 90s tier list. I put Radiohead in the S tier for their 90s output. Basically solely based on OK Computer. I think the Benz is decent. I think it's a little bit overrated, honestly, and Pablo Honey's just kind of meh. But their 2000s output is definitely some of the best material they've ever released, if not the best material they've ever released. There's not a single mediocre album they put out in the 2000s, in my opinion. Even Amnesiac I'd consider to be really good. I mean, and this catalog also includes Kid A, fantastic record, as well as In Rainbows, another absolutely brilliant record, two of their all-time best. S tier. System of a Down. Now, I'm not really sure if System of a Down technically falls into the nu metal category. I think they do, but of that scene, of that crowd, I think System of a Down, hands down, takes the cake for the best of those bands. Not only was the musicianship keynote and the songs were super fast and hard-hitting, but the singer's delivery was so eccentric. They were very unique for the genre, and they deserve a place in S tier. Green Day. So Green Day, believe it or not, only released 3 records in the 2000s. Those 3 being 2000's Warning, 2004's American Idiot, and 2009's 21st Century Breakdown. Now the 2000s saw Green Day get massive success. They were arguably the most successful rock band, or just maybe even most successful, I don't know about most successful artist, but they were definitely the most successful rock band on the planet at the time, especially with the release of American Idiot. Now, I grew up with Green Day, I grew up with American Idiot specifically. American Idiot was my favorite record for the longest time. And while I still respect it, I don't really listen to it all that much anymore, probably just because I've overplayed the shit out of it. But because of their success and their delve into more pop territories, I think it kind of diminished the quality of the band a little bit, well, a lot of it over time. And starting with American Idiot, even Warning to an extent, they played it a lot safer. The production was a lot cleaner, and the songs were more stadium rock oriented than the underground pop punk kind of sound they originally had in the early 90s. And while the result is something that still sounds distinctly Green Day, like their guitar tones, obviously Billy Joe's vocal delivery, Mike Dirnt's bass, everything is very distinct to Green Day. If you put on a song, you're like, that's Green Day, even before Billy starts singing. I think they did kind of start to blend in with a lot of other pop punk bands at the time, but like I said, I do gotta respect them for being the most successful rock band on the planet at the time. And American Idiot, while composition-wise is not all that unique for the most part, is still an ambitious punk rock opera. Ambitious in the sense for a massively successful pop punk band. And because of this, I am putting Green Day in A tier. Evanescence. I feel like Evanescence would fall into the butt rock category if they didn't have a female singer. That being said though, her vocals do add a lot to the music, and it's actually quite pleasant to listen to at times. It's not a band that I really listen to. I probably know like 2 songs by them. But I think what they did was decent. For the time at least. For what they were, I'll put them in B tier. Franz Ferdinand is a band that I think is very much a product of their time. Now, their music isn't dated to the point where it's unlistenable. It's not even dated to the point where it's bad. It's just, they kind of fall into the same category as Arctic Monkeys for me. The dancey, garagey pop rock that they made was very much a product of its time. And it's not quite as timeless as some of these other acts. I feel like it's the kind of sound that has been so oversaturated in commercials that it's almost novelty at this point. But I don't think Franz Ferdinand is bad in any way. I just, like I said, I think they're very much a product of their time, and they're not quite as timeless as some of these other ones. We're getting a lot in B tier. This one's also going in B tier. Nickelback! Alright, well, I think we all know where I'm placing Nickelback, and I'm placing Nickelback in D tier, and it's not just because it's a meme to hate Nickelback or whatever. I think Nickelback was actually fine for the butt rock that they were. You know, they didn't need to be anything bigger than what they were. I think they wanted to make radio butt rock, and they succeeded. So what I'm saying is, I think Nickelback gets more hate than they deserve, in the sense that they were what they needed to be. That being said, it's not very good. But you know, they had some radio hits that if they came on at a party or something, I wouldn't be opposed to it. I'd probably sing along. I'm familiar with a lot of their songs. You know, they were overplayed as shit. The Strokes. I love The Strokes very much. I think The Strokes and another band on here, the White Stripes, which I'll get to, kind of shaped the sound of the 2000s as far as pop rock went, which is where I think bands like Arctic Monkeys and Franz Ferdinand kind of get their sound from. And while I think the Strokes' sophomore and third album are good, their first album, 2001's Is This It?, I consider to be a perfect album. There's not many albums that I would consider to be perfect, and I feel like Is This It? Fits the bill. It's catchy, the tones are excellent, it's unique, the songwriting was phenomenal. Julian's croony vocals are very recognizable and add a lot to the signature sound of the Strokes. I think they did a lot to shape the pop rock scene of the 2000s, and they were a very unique class act for their time. And they shaped a lot of other acts at the time as well, so they are getting S tier. My Chemical Romance. Unfortunately, My Chemical Romance gets put in with the wrong crowds. They get thrown in with bands like fucking Asking Alexandria and Bring Me the Horizon and all that bullshit. Hell, they even get thrown in with Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco. They get thrown into a lot of crowds that they don't really belong in, because My Chemical Romance is actually a very good band. They even get thrown into the emo category a lot, which I understand, but personally I would only consider their first album, Bullets, to be their only true emo album. Everything else I'd consider like just heavy rock. But Gerard's energy and his vocals, the fast, riffy guitar playing, the pumping drum beats, the dark, macabre lyrics, and the overall showmanship of the band makes them timeless, in my opinion. My Chemical Romance was a very unique act, and they put out some of the best rock albums of the 2000s, in my opinion. Everything they put out in that era was fantastic. In fact, I'm pretty sure everything they made actually came out in the 2000s. Even though Conventional Weapons was released a little bit later, it was recorded in the 2000s. So yeah, like everything they made was a product of the 2000s. They, like I said, I love the band. I think they're really unique. I think they're very good. They're getting S tier. Gorillaz. I need to get more into Gorillaz. But that being said, I do love a large portion of their music. I think they're another one of those bands. I've been throwing the word unique around a lot, but you know, that's why a lot of these stick out and why a lot of them became successful, and I think that's definitely the case with Gorillaz. I think they were just a very one in a million kind of sound, and I think the albums they put out in the 2000s are arguably their best, with the exception of Plastic Beach, which I think came out in 2010? Yeah, it came out in 2010, so that technically doesn't count, but their first two albums are really good, and I think they deserve a good S tier spot as well. Fall Out Boy. I think Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco are very much, in many ways, the same band. Panic is a little dancier, I guess, but their singers sound very similar. Growing up, I actually didn't even know they were even different. I thought whenever I heard either one of their songs on the radio, I thought it was the same band. And I just could never get into Fall Out Boy. I don't know, they just kind of sound like radio pop punk to me. I'm putting them in C tier with Panic at the Disco, I guess. Arcade Fire, also one of my favorite acts of the 2000s. And while Neon Bible I think is good, Funeral is, again, one of those albums that I'd consider almost perfect. I love the avant-garde instrumentation and the shaky vocals and just the very uplifting, sincere delivery. I still get chills when I hear the song Wake Up. They're going in S tier as well. Foo Fighters. The Foo Fighters had some good songs in the 2000s. One that comes to mind for me is, I like the song, "The song getting the best, 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 the best." I do think their best songs came out of the 90s though. Yeah, I think they're like one of the only good post-grunge bands in my opinion. I think they're good for what they are, but I don't really think they're all that unique really. But you know, they're just like a nice, classy rock group that you know, it's like they make some good songs. You know, I don't really listen to them all that much, but I respect them. I'll put them in B tier. Maroon 5. They had some nice radio songs back in the day, like "She Will Be Loved." But yeah, Maroon 5 is they're going to the D tier. Muse. I actually really like Muse. So Muse released 4 albums, 4 of their best albums in the 2000s, those being Origin of Symmetry, Absolution, which is my personal favorite, but Origin comes close, Black Holes and Revelations, and The Resistance. And I think all of those are quite good. Some of them have some shaky moments, especially on the later half of those 4. But I like the very theatrical and spacey production on these records. I think Matt's vocals are very well performed, and I'm very keen of the fuzzy guitar tones as well. The overall musicianship and performance of Muse is something that I really enjoy, and I think they deserve a proper A tier spot. Vampire Weekend, I haven't listened to a whole lot of, but I think they almost fall into like the Franz Ferdinand Arctic Monkeys category, but I think they're just a little bit more quirky than those other two, I'd say. The guitar tones are cleaner and pickier, and I don't really have too much to say about Vampire Weekend, but I do think they're a little bit better than those two bands, but they kind of fall into that similar sound category, but I think they're the best of those. Yeah. Blink-182. I'm just not a Blink fan. I don't know, I've heard too many bands that sound like them, and while I'm sure they played a part in influencing a lot of those bands, I've just heard that sound so much to the point where, and it's just so easily replicated that I just can't really get much enjoyment out of Blink-182. And I think the vocals are just fucking grating to listen to most of the time. This might hurt the butts of some high school students, or I don't know, people that love pop punk, but Blink-182 is going in D tier. Papa Roach. I actually listened to a decent amount of Papa Roach in my middle school days, mostly because they were in a ton of Halo 3 montage and videos and stuff back when YouTube was dominated by that kind of content. And they're just very much a standard-ass butt rock group. Yeah, they're not really all that special at all, and they're kinda cringy now when you go back and listen to them. So yeah, we're going to D. We're going to D for Papa Roach. Queens of the Stone Age is a band that I need to get more into, I'd say. But what I'll just say this. What I have heard, I really liked. I think their production is fantastic. I think their songwriting is good. Yeah, I don't have much to say about Queens. I'll put them in A tier though. The Killers, I actually only know really like the hits for the Killers for the most part. I haven't looked too much into them either. But I think the hits are really good. And I have checked out their albums at some point, and I think they were definitely one of the better pop rock groups at the time. And and they're also going to get a fat A tier. The White Stripes, I mentioned them earlier. I think the White Stripes kind of go hand in hand with the Strokes of shaping the garage rock, poppy garage rock sound of the 2000s that became very popular. And they did a lot for being just a duo. I love their tones, their songs are great, they're hard-hitting, they're very stripped down. White Stripes get an S tier. And finally, we run into Weezer once again. Now, if you know me, you know that I'm very fond of Weezer, and that Weezer's actually probably my favorite band, realistically. That being said, if you're familiar with Weezer, you also know that they had a very rocky 2000s catalog. And while I think they had their moments in that catalog, like Maladroit and half of the Red album, I think albums like the Green Album, Make Believe, and Ratitude definitely bring them down a few tiers. Yeah, they had a very rocky 2000s catalog. Some great stuff, some okay stuff, some bad stuff. They're gonna go in B tier for the sake of their 2000s output. So yeah, that's my 2000s rock band tier list. I don't think this one will get as much hate as the other ones. Maybe it will, but yeah, you know, this is just what I think. This is what I like. Take it or leave it. Yeah. See you Starside.